Well, my introduction to tourists was very early in life. I was actually brought home from the nursing home to an accommodation house and spent the first 28 years of my life associated with people in that particular business, as well as others. Guiding, chasing around generally, horseback riding, and also driving the tourists from the boat to the house for their midday meal, which was the usual thing. In the earlier times of my experience, we saw the Ernest Law once a week. That was on a Monday. That was an excursion day. All the other part of the week it had to run to Kingston to meet the train, there being no road to Kingston from Queenstown until the Depression days. They used to leave Queenstown at 8 o'clock. You could get breakfast if you required it. And there were two calls. One was at Eltham Bay and the other at Glenorchy. The fare being, on the excursion day, 4 and 2pence return. However, the locals were never lucky enough in that direction, probably because if they went down from this end, they had to stay some time and there wouldn't be a return trip for the day and would cost us 6 and 11pence. At Eltham Bay, the people used to walk through to Brewery Lake, and at certain times of the year, there was a particularly luscious brand of blackberry used to grow there, and people used to get large quantities and take them back to home, probably for jam or jelly or some such thing. And there was usually quite a bit of debris in that direction left about the boat, and I've heard the boat hands growling about having to clean up after this. They arrived in Glenorchy about 10:30 and didn't leave again till 5. And this gave ample time for the horse traffic, which obtained right up till the early 20s, or about 1920, to do the trip, provided people could have lunch at Paradise House or Arcadia, which was going then, and have quite a wander around, leaving about 3 o'clock, or if there was any motor vehicle, at least not earlier than 3:30, and had quite a long day. But some of the vehicles they arrived in, as I remember, were somewhat rickety, and on occasions they didn't make the full trip. The main part of the season was from early December till just after Easter, with perhaps later on an excursion at Labour weekend. With something like 30 people as a maximum in the accommodation house, there was a lot to do in entertaining them, and much horse traffic, and trips in buggies up the Rees and up the Rootburn were carried out. Also a certain amount of climbing, day trips round about the area, and usually we managed to keep them pretty well occupied. Of course, tariffs in those days weren't very great. They started off the house originally in 1891, something like 30 shillings a week. And in my last remembrance of it, it had only got to £3 or 10 shillings a day. And for that, they had a comfortable bed, 3 good meals, and generally well looked after, but no fancy trimmings. And although today it would probably be considered a health and hazard altogether, or something in the shape of a rather definite interference with humanity, it's nobody that I know of ever was ill or anything happened to them other than perhaps falling off a rock or slipping on something, and nothing serious happened. Quite often there would be, on the excursion day, anything up to 100 people for each of the accommodation houses for lunch. And with their own boarders, it involves quite an effort to keep them fed and looked after. After about 1921, most of the horse traffic, as far as the trip from Glenorchy to Paradise was concerned, was finished.
Bridging the Rees River and the Onslow burn allowed greater access to the Paradise area by motor vehicles.
And this gave complete access to Paradise under almost any conditions. Prior to that, even the motor vehicles had to ford the Rees, and that, of course, created one or two little problems. This carried on until later in the 20s, when the boats used to leave a little earlier. In fact, they eventually cut it down to around about 3 o'clock. And during the Depression days, during the winter months, there was sometimes only one boat a week, which made the poor old mail deliverer, of which I was the one, rather busy delivering 6 papers to every individual, plus their bread and meat and any other stuff they had coming in. However, this didn't last very long, and we went back to at least 2. But as the Depression deepened and things got rather murky, the numbers fell off quite a good deal. And then, of course, with the war, there were some occasions when they were not allowed to travel and things deteriorated rather badly. And our association with Paradise House finished in 1942. I didn't have anything further to do with that particular type of work until 1946, doing another 13 years till 1959, driving for another person, and in most instances feeding the people with a cup of tea, scones, sandwiches, etc. on the trip. Of course, my experience has only been about half the period over which tourists have come to the head of the lake. They started very early in the piece and carried on. I think Anthony Trollope, the great novelist, he was one of the earlier ones, and it was consistently on the go for all that period from, well, probably the late 60s. And in those days there were, at one stage, 3 hotels in Glenorchy which catered for tourists. There was the hotel at Kinloch, and generally speaking, there was quite a little service for people travelling about. And even if there weren't great numbers, at least they had a good look round. In late 1929, 1930, my friend Mr. Harry Bryant, he started his motor vehicle trip from Kinloch to the route there and continued on till the conclusion of the steamer service. At that time, or prior to that, the Onslow, which we only saw about once a week, then landed alternately and provided fair go for either side. It started to come a little more frequently about 1929 when the sawmill started in Rootburn and there was a lot of timber to be shifted. Generally speaking, the tourist industry has, if not flourished, at least existed for practically the whole period of which the head of the lake has been occupied. And it's quite likely, in fact it's almost a certainty, that it will continue on for many years to come. It's now, of course, very much different. There's no steamer, but with the advent of the Dart Bridge, it opens up both the Rootburn and the Paradise area, also the Rees Valley, which now has a good road of it, and much more scope for people to travel round. I won't say anything about the steamers themselves. They've been described in many instances and in much better than I could ever hope to do. But I would like to say a word about the cruise. There were a great lot of chaps from 1929 to 1959, or 1925 to 1959. There's a long period over which to have association with them. And I knew a great many, because naturally in that period there was comings and goings. And a very large number of them have now travelled on their last voyage, and all I can do is wish them Godspeed, because they were the most helpful individuals that one could ever work with. Great chaps, the whole lot of them, from the highest to the lowest, if there's such a thing as steps in that direction. And I would very much like to pay my tribute to the whole number of them. Probably very few people realise the hard times they had, sometimes with the smaller steamer in the flooded and stormy period, sleet and snow, and sometimes fog. In the whole of that time, there was only once that the steamer never landed at Glenorchy, and that was because the old wharf was getting badly silted up. It was only possible to poke the nose of the boat in and get the stuff delivered, and the new one was not completed. On that particular day, there was one of the strongest southerlies I've ever seen, terrific waves, and the steamer laid at Kinloch till late in the afternoon on the hope that the wind would die, but it didn't. So eventually it came across, poked its nose onto the beach at Blanket Bay, which is a mile below the present wharf, put off the perishables and mail, and gathered up the cream cans, of which a lot used to go away from here in those days, and departed. And I think anyone from a distance looking at that area would have thought, or probably considered, it was the second exodus from Egypt, because everybody in the district could get their car within about a third of a mile from the place, and they had to go and carry all their stuff home again through the fern and scrub and so on, and the high old time was had by all, including me, as I had to carry all the stuff for deliveries in the Reese Valley. And thank goodness it was the one and only occasion that ever happened. I've never heard of any other. There may have been in the 50 years or so prior to my meeting with the boys, but I think I would have heard of it. But they were a great lot of chaps. We had a marvellous working knowledge with them. Quite frequently we would take the trucks down and they would load them direct off the boat, which saved them putting stuff into the goods shed, and us wheeling it out again. And we worked pretty well together. So I would again say Godspeed to the lot of them, and a very big thank you to all the things that they did for me and the obligements that were carried out. Thank you.